portholes, my story. From a channel called Sirius.
Oh, okay.
And we're talking mysterious lights, creepy sounds, and even a message from something called the White Brotherhood.
Wow.
Let's dive in and see what we can make of this, shall we?
Sounds good to me. You know, the thing that really gets me right off the bat is how this all starts.
Okay.
Winter 2006 in northern Italy. This person's having a late night conversation about good versus evil right before bed.
Ooh, setting the mood.
Exactly right. Talking about these intense topics, especially before sleep, can really prime the mind for some unusual experiences.
I can see that.
Yeah, it's like our thoughts become this breeding ground for what we might experience in that in-between state, you know, between sleep and wakefulness.
And then that brings us to the first encounter, right?
Yeah.
The narrator wakes up, can't move, and there's this tall, pale figure in the room. They even say they felt hypnotized just staring at it.
Right, and that's a classic description of sleep paralysis. I mean, that can be terrifying even without the added figure, you know? But what's interesting here is the sensory detail they give.
Okay.
The feeling of fire on the pillow oranges, following that hypnotic gaze.
Wow.
These specific details make it more than just a generic sleep paralysis episode.
It's almost like their subconscious mind is weaving this whole narrative, right?
Exactly. Taking these common themes of sleep paralysis and layering on all this highly personalized imagery.
Oh, that's really interesting.
It is. And, you know, even if we can chalk it up to the science behind sleep paralysis, the emotional impact of an experience like that, especially one with such vivid details, it can stick with you. It can linger long after the event itself.
For sure. So then about a year and a half later, the narrator and their partner move to a new house, right?
Yeah.
And it's this isolated place out in the countryside.
The classic setting for strange things to happen. That move is crucial because it seems like that's when things really ramp up. It coincides with an increase in the frequency and intensity of these unexplained phenomena.
Like the volume gets turned up on the weirdness.
Exactly. It's like something about that new environment acted as a catalyst, you know, like an amplifier for these experiences.
Okay, so cue the spooky music.
Okay, Chuckles.
Because the first major event at the new house involves the narrator seeing this huge pyramid-shaped structure with glowing portholes out in the woods.
I mean, it's easy to jump to conclusions about alien architecture and stuff, but there are other things to think about.
Like what?
Well, think about it. It's nighttime. The narrator's in this totally unfamiliar place, and our brains are wired to find patterns.
Right, even when they might not actually be there.
Exactly. So could it have been a trick of the light? Maybe something familiar but seen in a different way in the darkness?
That's true.
Yeah. Our perception can be so easily influenced by our surroundings and even our state of mind. Add in the darkness the unfamiliarity of a new place, and it's easy to see how a distant light or some natural formation could be perceived as something way more extraordinary.
Yeah, but what about the sound? Or I guess the lack of sound.
Right.
The narrator says that the whole thing was completely silent, and then they couldn't find any trace of it the next day.
Now, that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
If it were just a misidentified object, you'd think there would be some kind of sound, some evidence it was really there.
Right.
But nothing. And that's what adds a layer of mystery that's hard to just brush aside.
It's like their mind constructed this super detailed visual experience, but their other senses just weren't on board.
Right. It almost makes you wonder if this was purely internal, like something their subconscious cooked up, or if there was some external element at play that we just don't have the tools to detect or understand.
Okay, so we've got this pyramid-shaped thing out in the woods. What happens next?
So then the narrator describes seeing some more really strange things. We're talking a moon that seemed way too large and low in the sky, and then they saw moving, pulsating lights.
Whoa, hold on. Giant moons and dancing lights? That's starting to sound like a UFO checklist.
It is tempting to go there, right?
Yeah.
But let's not forget that even experienced observers can misidentify things in the sky.
Like planets and stars and stuff.
Exactly. And we also can't rule out things like drones or aircraft that might have some unusual flight patterns.
True. But the way these lights are described dancing and pulsating, it's not your average night sky.
Right, and that's what's so fascinating about these accounts.
Yeah.
They straddle that line between something potentially explainable and something genuinely perplexing.
I like that, straddling the line.
Yeah, and even if there are perfectly normal explanations for some of these sightings, the way the narrator experiences them and the emotional impact it has, that can't be ignored.
So we've got weird visuals happening left and right. Does it stay that way, or do things take another turn?
Oh, it takes a turn.
Okay, tell me.
The narrator starts hearing things too. Strange sounds.
Like what?
Buzzing in their left ear, a constant ticking like a clock almost. Radio waves, hissing sounds coming from above the roof.
Okay, now this is getting into some seriously spooky territory.
Right. And while these auditory phenomena could be things like tinnitus or even those hypnagogic hallucinations,
That's what?
they're basically vivid auditory or visual experiences that happen as you're falling asleep.
Okay, yeah.
But there are some really interesting details that make this case stand out.
What do you mean?
Well, the narrator says these sounds were only in their left ear.
Oh, really?
The ear that was facing away from their partner as they slept, it's almost like the sounds were targeted, like they were directional in some way.
That's so creepy.
And then, get this, the narrator also mentions their pets started acting weird.
Really?
Yeah, like they were reacting to unseen presences, and this all started happening around the same time as the sounds.
Okay, so we've got strange lights, weird sounds, and now even the pets are freaking out. This place is like a portal to another dimension or something.
Well, it certainly seems like the activity is escalating, building towards something. And this is where we start to get into some truly bizarre stuff.
Okay, lay it on me. This white brotherhood thing you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So after that sleep paralysis episode back in 2006, the narrator starts researching all this stuff, UFOs, extraterrestrials, that kind of thing.
Makes sense.
And they come across this online message from this group calling themselves the White Brotherhood.
Okay, and what do they say?
So according to the message, they've been trying to contact world leaders, but they were rejected.
Oh, no.
Now they're reaching out to individuals.
Okay.
They're seeking consent for a public demonstration of their spaceships.
Wait, hold on. A public spaceship demonstration, that's a pretty big claim.
It is. And while it's important to be skeptical, it's also interesting to note that this kind of narrative, this idea of a hidden group with advanced knowledge or technology trying to reach out to us,
Right.
it pops up a lot in UFO lore and even New Age spirituality.
So it's tapping into something that resonates with people. That desire for contact, for answers, for something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. It's like a modern myth, a story that speaks to our hopes and fears about the unknown. And for someone who is already having these strange experiences, encountering a story like this can be really compelling.
Yeah, I bet. Especially with the timing of the message right after that sleep paralysis episode.
Right. It's almost like their subconscious was primed for this kind of information.
And then on top of that, the narrator says they got telepathic confirmation from this group. They heard a voice while they were half asleep.
Yeah. It's like the line between their inner world and the actual external reality is getting blurry.
That's wild. So what happens next?
Well, let's just say the strangeness doesn't stop there. The narrator starts getting these cryptic messages on their business Facebook page.
What?
And these messages mention their birth name, which wasn't publicly available anywhere.
Okay, that's taking things to a whole new level. Now we're talking potential privacy breaches, online stalking. This is getting really creepy.
Right. And the messages themselves are pretty unsettling. They talk about the narrator being at the peak of their evolution and attracting the attention of both angels and dark ones.
Oh.
It's straight out of a supernatural thriller. And then there's that sign-off, it's not a goodbye, but a goodbye.
Chills.
It's like whoever's sending these messages is playing mind games, trying to instill fear and uncertainty.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's textbook manipulation, using ambiguity and ominous language to create a sense of unease.
And the fact that these messages are coming through Facebook, it blurs the lines between their personal life and the online world.
Right. Makes it even harder to dismiss or ignore.
So what happens next? Does the narrator confront this online stalker? Or do things get even weirder? Tell me, I need to know.
Don't worry, we'll get to all of that. But first, I think it's important to take a step back and consider the bigger picture here.
What do you mean?
Well, we've talked about sleep paralysis, misidentified objects, the power of suggestion, even online manipulation.
Right.
But there's another layer to think about here. The psychological and cultural factors that could be shaping how the narrator is interpreting all of this.
You're saying their beliefs, their cultural background, even their personal history could all be playing a role in how they see these events.
Exactly. We all come to these things with our own baggage, right? Especially when we're dealing with something as inherently mysterious as the unknown.
It's true. So before we jump to conclusions about alien encounters or the supernatural, it's important to factor in the human element.
Right.
The way our minds work and how our beliefs and experiences shape our understanding of reality.
Exactly. And with that in mind, let's dive into the next part of this story, shall we? Things are about to get really interesting.
Okay, lead the way. I'm on the edge of my seat.
All right, so, when we were talking about the narrator's beliefs and background, well, there's this part in the transcript that really jumped out at me.
What's that?
They talk about this feeling of being protected from death.
Yeah.
Even though they went through all these terrifying events, like multiple near-death experiences when they were a kid.
Seriously?
Yeah, and it makes you wonder if this deep-seated belief that they're somehow protected played a role in how they saw everything that happened later on.
You mean like if you already think you're being watched over? Maybe
Yeah.
it's easier to see weird or scary things as part of a bigger plan? Like some kind of test even?
Yeah, exactly. It's a really interesting example of how the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what our lives mean can actually shape how we experience things. You know how we react to the world around us?
It's like they're the main character in their own supernatural adventure story,
Right.
facing all these crazy encounters with this sense of destiny, even purpose.
Okay.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
It's definitely a powerful narrative, and it reminds us how strong the human mind can be. It
Yeah.
can shape things and be shaped by the things that happen to us. Speaking of shaping things, remember those cryptic Facebook messages?
Oh yeah?
Well, they take a really dark turn when the sender says they know about the narrator's experiences. They even mention the castle with portholes.
No way! So someone online is claiming to have seen or maybe even been a part of these weird events. This is some serious conspiracy theory stuff.
It definitely adds a whole other layer to this story. And it makes you question what's real online.
Right, because anyone can hide behind a screen name and make stuff up.
Exactly. We can't know for sure who sent those messages or what they were trying to do, but one thing's for sure, they had a huge impact on the narrator.
How so?
They say they felt intrigued and scared at the same time, drawn to the mystery, but also worried about what it all meant.
It's like one of those ghost stories where someone keeps getting messages from a stranger, leading them into a dark world of secrets.
That's a great comparison, and it shows how these online interactions can blur the lines between the virtual and the real, especially when they tap into our deepest fears.
Okay, so do these messages actually lead to anything? Or do they just add to the mystery?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. Remember how we talked about misidentified objects? Well, the narrator describes seeing something that's pretty hard to explain away as just a mistake.
Okay, what is it?
A massive, silent, oval-shaped object that they called the oval cigar.
An oval cigar. That sounds like something straight out of a UFO documentary.
It does, doesn't it? And what makes this sighting even more compelling is that the narrator's collaborator saw it too.
Really? So the person who didn't believe any of this at first?
Yeah, they both saw it.
Okay, so now we have two witnesses.
Yeah.
That definitely makes the story more believable.
Right. When you have more than one person seeing the same thing, it's hard to just say it was all in their heads.
I agree. So what do we think about this oval cigar? Is it aliens? Or could it be something else?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's easy to jump to the alien conclusion,
Yeah,
but it's important to look at all the possibilities.
like what?
Sometimes people mistake things like experimental aircraft or even weird weather for UFOs, and we can't rule out a hoax or a really elaborate prank, especially with those online messages and the potential for someone to be manipulating things behind the scenes.
True, but the narrator is adamant about how huge and silent this thing was. It wasn't like a drone or a weather balloon.
Yeah,
And they also mentioned other people seeing UFOs in the area around the same time.
right.
Even sightings that went all the way into Switzerland.
That's a big detail. If there are other reports of similar sightings from credible sources, then that really strengthens the possibility that something strange is going on.
So we've got the oval cigar, multiple witnesses, and possible connections to other UFO sightings. What's the verdict? Aliens or not?
Well, there isn't always a clear answer when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The evidence is often open to interpretation, and there's
Yeah.
always that element of mystery.
So what you're saying is we'll never know for sure.
It's kind of up to each person to decide what they believe based on what we know.
That's fair. But before we finish up, there's one detail from the transcript that I just can't get out of my head.
Oh, yeah.
What's that?
The narrator keeps talking about experiencing things on their left side. Remember the buzzing in the left ear?
Yeah.
And how they felt the presence of the white brotherhood on their left. It's like their left side is this channel for all the weird stuff.
That's a really interesting observation. And it brings up all the symbolism and archetypes.
Okay.
In lots of cultures, the left side represents things like intuition, the subconscious, the feminine.
So maybe focusing on the left side hints at something deeper.
Right.
Something beyond logic and rational explanations. Like their intuition is trying to guide them or warn them or even connect them to something bigger than themselves.
It's definitely a possibility. And it brings us back to that idea of liminal spaces.
Those in-between places.
Exactly, those thresholds where our senses get heightened and the boundaries of reality start to get a little fuzzy.
So it's like their left side is a doorway to another realm, and they're being pulled through it whether they like it or not. That's a powerful image. And it speaks to how much we're drawn to the unknown. That desire to go beyond what we know and explore the parts of reality where anything seems possible.
Okay, you've officially spooked me. But before I fall down a rabbit hole of internet conspiracies, maybe we should move on to the last part of this deep dive.
Sounds good to me. We still have a lot to cover, and I have a feeling it's going to get even more intriguing.
All right, so my mind is officially blown. Mysterious lights, cryptic messages, a giant flying cigar, and now this whole left side thing. I don't even know where to begin.
It is a lot to take in, isn't it? And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. It really makes us think about the limits of what we know and what we can explain.
It's like we want to find a simple explanation for all this strangeness. You know, like a nice little box to put it all in, but the universe just isn't cooperating.
Exactly. We're always trying to find patterns to make stories that help us understand the world.
Right.
But sometimes those stories just fall apart and we end up with more questions than answers.
So what do we do when that happens? Do we just say, well, that was weird, and move on? Or is there a way to explore the mystery without getting lost in a bunch of speculation?
That's the real trick, isn't it? Finding that balance between being skeptical and being open to the possibility that something truly extraordinary might be happening.
Right. It's like walking a tightrope between what we know for sure and all the things we don't.
Exactly. And sometimes walking that tightrope can lead to some really unexpected insights, not just about reality itself, but about ourselves and our place in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, so maybe we're not going to solve all the mysteries of the universe today.
Right, chuckles.
But maybe we can at least understand a little bit more about what it's like to encounter the unknown as a human being. What do you think is the most important thing for our listener to take away from all of this?
That's a great question. I think it's the importance of what I call informed wonder.
Informed wonder. Okay, tell me more.
It's about being curious and open to the possibility of the extraordinary, but without letting go of your critical thinking skills.
So it's like having one foot in reality and one foot in the realm of the unknown.
Exactly. Embrace the mystery, but also remember that the way we see things can really shape our experiences sometimes without us even realizing it.
So next time I see a weird light in the sky, I'm not going to jump straight to alien invasion.
It chuckles.
I'm going to take a moment to really look at it, be curious, and just let myself feel that sense of wonder, that reminder that there's still so much out there that we don't understand.
That's the spirit. And who knows, maybe that sense of wonder will lead to new discoveries or new ways of understanding the world. Or maybe it'll just give you a deeper appreciation for how amazing and strange it is to exist.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through the unexplained. Until next time, keep looking up, keep asking questions, and never stop exploring those mysteries that are all around us and even inside us.